How's it? Sean here, and welcome back to Have You Asked Your Dad, the podcast that explores the intricacies of becoming a father, of being a father, and then questioning Dad about his experiences around exactly that subject. Today's episode, we explore, together with Terence, what it was like for him to become a dad to his firstborn, Liam. It's a great story that involves all sorts of twists and turns, and I think you're going to learn a lot about Terence's parenting journey and what it is like to adopt a child in South Africa as well. Hey, if you're listening via a podcast platform, please remember to subscribe to Have You Asked Your Dad? And brand new for 2023, you can also find us on YouTube. So maybe you want to see our faces. Go ahead. Right now, though, here's the episode.
First Lieutenant Lutz, how are you, sir?
I am well, Uncle. Thank you. It's not often that somebody puts me in first place.
So I'm not sure.
Happy to be first.
Is a first lieutenant better than like a third lieutenant? Like, is it
we
a
really
ranking?
need to do our research.
Yes.
Yeah.
One day.
I can look it up quick.
No, don't worry. It doesn't make any. There's no way in the world we could possibly. We would never get access to that information ever. Where would we ever find information like that? So the last episode, we started the series, which was a great idea that you had, of talking about our experiences of becoming dads. Our first, like the first few days and weeks and months of becoming a dad. We spoke quite emotionally about you and Zoe.
Yep.
Because that is an emotional story, and we're going to continue that series because it's time to talk about Liam and Eli and Terence and how that all works together.
I am very excited for this conversation, more so than I was for the conversation that I had about my own daughter. Don't ever tell her I said that.
No, I've got to tell you, there's a little bit of anxiety around this conversation. I was the exact opposite. I was much more excited to talk to you about Zoe than I am to dig into what I was feeling back in the day.
So then we can kind of call this a normal feeling.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I love to talk about my child, and I know you do too. So let's not have anybody misinterpret what we're trying to say. Liam and Eli are such interesting kids for me, and your entire family dynamic is so interesting for me. Can I say this quickly? Yep. There was a Facebook post years ago, Terence, that I think you guys had done an ad for something, and someone had commented on the post going, if everybody could just stop being so darn PC, would they stop with this combination of families and making us believe? And Terence is like, actually, that's my wife, and those are my two kids. So it's very normal.
Yep, I remember that. We actually took a photo of the four of us with a sign saying, like, hi, and the person's handle, like, hey, this is us. We exist. We're here.
Yeah. So we're going to chat today about Liam's journey with you and how he became part of your family. And I'm very excited to learn more about that. And can I start by saying that I know you did some caring, I think it was, and I don't know how that process works. So for my mind, when I first met you, Terence, for my mind, I first met you and I told my wife, that's the guy that's like raised 14 kids but doesn't have one of his own.
Yeah, there was a period of my life where that was kind of my calling card. In a way that I kind of feel a little bit sheepish about now, to be honest. But we were back in the day. We were temporary or safety care parents. That's basically when, if a child's put up for adoption, there's a waiting period before the social worker can place the child with the adoptive parents, right? So the child can't be with the adoptive parents. The child can't be with the biological parents, so they need to find a place for the child to be cared for in that period. And there are obviously large homes where lots of children get cared for, but also there are lots of individual families across South Africa who will take in one or two children for a certain period of time. And that's what we did for, in the early years of marriage, before we had our own kids. We kind of thought, this is something that Julie's really passionate about. We don't have our own children. We have capacity to do this for a bit. Let's give it a go.
Okay, so was my 14? Was that close?
Yes,
was it less than that? More than
14 is spot on. We 14 kids. So, so this is where it becomes tricky talking about Liam's story, because there's a lot of issues around talking about adoptive children's stories on their behalf and taking their right way to talk about their own stories, which is funny. It's actually something that like it's a right that all kids should have, but obviously adoptive kids are particularly vulnerable to have their stories taken from them. So I'm going
Sure.
to endeavor in this episode, because the whole point of this is to get the dad's perspective on what went
100%.
down. So I'm going to try not to read into too much about his story, but basically, Liam was the 14th child that we cared for.
Okay. All right.
And Julie and I had always agreed that we were never going to adopt or try to adopt any of the children that we were caring for, because our mission in doing that was we wanted the biological parents who are putting their children up for adoption, we want them to know that their child is being cared for and loved and cherished. And for the future adoptive parents, we wanted them to know that their child was cared for and loved, and that there's all of these photos and there's a lot of like notes and stuff, because often adoptive parents miss out on those, very essential early few months. So that was our goal. Our goal wasn't to like find a child to adopt. Our goal was to make sure that both of those other groups of people were loved and cared for, and were engaging with the child in a way that was most beneficial to all people in the adoption triad, which is a thing that I learned about.
It's such a heartwarming thing to know that this even exists. So thank you for sharing what you have thus far. I think for most of us, we don't really think about what happens prior to a child being adopted and going to live with their adoptive family. So it's eye-opening, I'm sure, to many to learn that there is such a thing, and that you did it so many times, Terence. Well done.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to pat yourself on the back for something you did almost a decade ago now. So, but yeah, it was a fulfilling and difficult and heart-wrenching period of my life.
Yeah.
And there's no regrets for that, but it was tough. It was a tough time.
And as you say, without trying to tell Liam's story, because this is about you, without being able to say why he was the 14th and the last that you cared for, and what the decision was, or how you came to the decision to adopt him. The fact of the matter is that he is part of your family, very much so. And I'm interested to know, as the dad to Liam, how excited were you to then have a son in your home? I'm going to say permanently now, because for the longest time you were caring and then seeing them off, and caring and then sending them off on their way.
I mean, there's a whole kind of backstory into how we got to the point where we decided that we would like to try to adopt Liam. And I mean, that's something I'm comfortable talking about, because it's like my perspective, because again, we had agreed, like it was an agreement between husband and wife, that we would never try. So we none of us want to broach the subject of like, hey, this child really fits in with our flow. We're, like, I had personally never, out of all the kids that I'd cared for, I had a feeling about Liam that I can't quite explain. And just knowing that we had agreed never to try to adopt it, I didn't want to bring it up. Not knowing that Julie was having the exact same thoughts at the same time. And it took a good, I think, about 3 months before we actually like broached the subject with each other. Like, hey, what are you thinking about this? And to discover that the other person was having the same thoughts and feelings was quite a relief. We did know that it was a bit of a process to go from being a child's temporary carer to, full-time mom and dad. There's a lot of potential legal ramifications and court battles. And so we really had to decide whether this was, how strongly do we feel about this? Are we willing to do whatever it takes to be Liam's mom and dad? And Liam wasn't his name at the time. We moved his first name to his surname, it's whole thing. But were we willing to do whatever it took? And we decided that yes, we actually were willing to do whatever it took to be his mom and dad. That's how strongly we felt about it. And once we made that decision, everything kind of started to fall in place. So then we went to our social workers with a lot of trepidation, because we knew that there were other temporary care families who had who had been told that they can't adopt the child that they would like to that they were trying to adopt. So we were very nervous that there was going to be a bit of a fight in our hands. We told the social workers what we were thinking, and they were like, "That makes a lot of sense. We think it's a great fit. We think it works really well. Let's start the process." And 2-3 months later, we were signing a court document in front of a judge saying that it's one of those things that I love, because on the legal document, it basically says, for all intents and purposes, there's no, under the law sees no difference between Liam's right as my child and Eli's right as my child. Liam is, according to the law, Liam is my natural born child, which I quite liked. So there was several moments of freaking out along that journey of oh my word, this is actually happening. Oh my word, I'm actually going to be dad. Like, after all of these pretend dad moments with all the other kids we're caring for, this was like real and forever. There was a lot of like anxiety around the initial moments, whether I was good enough, whether I was successful enough in other parts of my life to like be to provide for this like growing family. But then I used to just imagine what it would be like to have Liam be a 10-year-old or a teenager, walk around having conversations with him, and I just would get really excited about those moments. So,
gosh, I have so many questions and so many things that we can delve into there, Terence. But you said to me that you were freaking out a few times along the way. And there's something in hearing you talk about being a safety care parent and then making that decision to adopt, which I don't know why we aren't all forced to go through that process. I know it sounds harsh, but so many parents become parents. They're like, actually, this is so much harder than I thought it was ever going to be. And I'm not really equipped to do this. So, there's something in that thinking of being able to, I don't know, put on some training wheels and actually run the gambit a little bit. But you'd done that several times already, and yet you were still freaking out and still experiencing some form of trepidation and anxiety around having a child that you were going to look after for, very many years to come. What were the conversations like between yourself and Julie in that regard of getting one another to be on the same page? Because that's very important. You had already said that you both wanted this to happen, but then through the processes, there are papers to sign, there are people to convince, there are other things that are going on. What was that like for you?
I saw all of that as a bit of a rite of passage. In my mind, I had to earn the right to be Liam's dad. That was a privilege that had to happen, which is obviously something that biological parents don't necessarily go through, because it's such my child has arrived and therefore I am the child's parent. With the adoption process, you have to prove to yourself, you have to prove to literally a series of legal entities that you are worthy to be a parent. But also for me, it was just for my imposter syndrome, for my self-esteem, that I needed to go through those hard conversations, all the paperwork, all the training, so that when the judge stamps and says, "You are now this boy's father," I feel like I kind of have a right to that because I've earned it. And a lot of the conversation, again, what often happens with Julie and I is when we are on the same page with something, it becomes like a bit of a runaway train where she goes into full planning mode and to administration mode. I go into like problem solving mode, and like together we're, like I don't know, some sort of superhero team that gets stuff done. And it doesn't always happen. It's not like we are the superhero couple but the few times that it does happen, and this was for me, at least with my memory of going through the adoption process, it was whenever there was a hurdle that had to be jumped over, the two of us were very united in jumping that hurdle. And I think there was a lot of value in the first conversation of, Are you willing to do whatever it takes? Yes. Am I willing to do whatever it takes? Yes. Okay, so we have this agreement. So I can't rescind on that agreement now. I can't not do whatever it takes after agreeing on this big thing. Um, so yeah, so there was a lot of, I think there was a lot of confidence that came through the process.
And can you tell me, Terence, how old was Liam when he was first in your care? And how did the roles of caregiving, how were they divvied up, when he was in your care as a safety care child,
Mm.
and then becoming a parent? I mean, it's very different again from a biological, from mom doing the feeding. Mom, there's certain roles that are just assumed and assigned automatically. It's different here.
100%. So Liam arrived the day after he was born,
Oh, wow.
which again, for most adoptive parents, they don't have that experience, right? They only have a few months later. So because we were temporary care parents, Liam arrived literally the next day. At the time, we had kind of divided up the roles. I had basically said that the only poo nappy that I'm going to change is a mentor child's poo nappy. That was part of the agreement of the safety care thing. My wife was really passionate about it. I wanted to support her in that, but I kind of did. I said, yeah, this is my line in the sand. I'm not changing someone else's kid's poo bum.
Okay.
That's just the way everything else was fair game. So feeding, prepping the food, bathing, all the childcare stuff. We got a lot of support from people in our church that helped us afford a nanny during the day. So that was really helpful, and I don't think it would have been possible to do any of that without that kind of support. And yeah, so that was the way we kind of engaged with it, and the way that changed. And what was really interesting is that I was talking to Julie about those first days recently in preparation for this episode, and she reminded me that actually I changed Liam's poo bum before we decided to adopt him. It was just something that I just happened to do, and she was like, that was the moment that she realized that I felt differently about this one, that there was something different here, because there wasn't a nope. Like before, I was adamant I'm not gonna, but for this one, I was like, oh yeah, no worries. And after we realized that we were going to adopt him, and there was obviously a after the adoption itself, there's a lot more long-term thinking that suddenly happens. You really start thinking about, well, what kind of person am I? Because the person I am is going to affect what, this child isn't just here for 3 months. This child's here for hopefully forever or a long time. And the person that this child's going to be is fundamentally linked to the kind of person I am now. So suddenly there's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-doubt. A lot of work had to happen on myself, thinking about the kind of role I wanted to be, engaging with the kind of dad I had. My dad had passed away at that point. He had passed away a good 7 or 8 years before Liam arrived. Engaging with all of that sort of stuff suddenly had to happen. And again, luckily the adoption process takes a few months, so that there's a little bit of time to process some of that. And I'm still processing that. I'm still processing all of that. So I think that was the big fundamental change. I think before, when I'm playing with Liam as a little baby, I'm just playing with the baby that's in our home. Afterwards, I'm playing with a baby with the idea of, okay, developmentally, this is a good game to play. This is got to do tummy time, because we've got to get some strong tummies and neck muscles going on, and what kind of interaction with suddenly, these are all things that my wife cared about deeply with all of the babies. I was a little bit less on board with, until, wow, okay, this is long term.
Was there a celebration, Terence? Was there a celebration when Liam joined the family? What did that look like?
That was a welcome to the mentors tea at my mom's house, where all the grandmas and aunties and uncles came around, and they had obviously all met him before, so it wasn't like a sudden like, who is this kid? But that, for me, I think that was obviously, I feel like that was more for me and for Julie
Mm.
than for anyone else. It was uh, again, this kind of happens automatically with biological babies. And it's something that you have to be quite deliberate with to make sure that you need buy-in from your family with something like this, and you also need to know where your family stands. You know, when you're a white wife, a colored husband adopting a black baby, there's a lot of dynamics, including race dynamics, that you have to take into account. And knowing that your whole family is on board and that your whole family is ready to love this child, including your extended family, uh, was a great relief. And so that was really important to do for us, just to also to kind of put a kind of bookend to that process of
Yeah.
this is now this is changed. This moment is different than what it was.
I'm very glad that that happened, as you say, for you, because that's essentially what it needs to be. It was for you as parents, and for everybody to come together and recognize you as exactly that, for them to show that they accept and that they value and they appreciate everything that you are doing, and that they're here to support you going forward. So it's very important, as you say, for that process to have happened. And again, very different to something that might have happened with a biological child, because invariably then the attention is very much on mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to know now, Terence, was that attention, I don't want to say was the attention split up, but how did it make you feel? Where were you in this particular story? Were you front and center? Were you slightly off to the side? Were you, how do you remember that playing out?
So in my mind, I would look at the dads who became fathers through biological birth, and I felt like I was more centered than any of them were in their stories.
Mm.
Um, because Julie wasn't the vulnerable bringer of life in the story. She was, her and I were exactly the same. We were doing the same things. We were, the cost to both of us was equal. The benefit to both of us was equal. Um, so there was definitely, and of course I can now compare this because Eli came around the next year, but definitely surprise. Oh yeah, for next week you'll get that whole story next week. But I really did feel like I was as crucial a part of that story as Julie was. You know, there wasn't a part of me that felt that she was elevated to like the saintly status of motherhood, and everyone just forgot about dad. Uh, so that was pretty great, actually. It was a really
Mm.
great feeling of, I really felt like we were a team and that we were equals in this team, and with Liam making it three, like I felt like we were the trio, and
Yes.
not just dad to the side running support, you know, in the quietly in the background with mom and
Mm.
child getting all the attention. It was very much the three of us together.
And isn't that so interesting as well? If you think back and reflect on it a little bit, it might be unusual words to use, but it kind of gives you as dad some form of ownership to what's going on, because you aren't just a support act, right? Which means you're as invested, and not that you wouldn't have been if you were biologically, Liam's dad, but to the extent where you really feel like this is your journey and your path and you're involved in everything, as opposed to being there as simply the support structure, especially in those beginning stages, which probably gives you a lot more, not sure if it's the right word, authority, ownership, tangibleness on raising Liam.
Yeah, my role was validated by other people. And as much
Yeah.
as we don't want to get external validation, we're humans and we do need it. And mom,
Acknowledgement is important, man. Yeah.
totally. And the thing is, in that early period, you're right. Moms tend to, in our kind of cultures, moms tend to get a lot of validation, at least in comparison to what dads get in the early years. Or at least their role is validated more than the father role is. Whereas in this case, I felt that my role was accepted as, I think authority is another good word. Like I had a level of control and authority over how this child would be raised. It wasn't a
Mm.
case of we err onto mom's side, onto mom's decision, onto mom's thinking. There was a real partnership when it came to raising them in the first few years. And again, I think it's because it was such a combined effort in a way that maybe biological kids, this sounds weird, but like, biological kids aren't a combined effort to bring the child into the family. There's definitely one person doing 90% of the legwork and the other person having to play the support role. That's just the reality of it. Whereas this was, we're all doing everything equally as much. And even afterwards, there's the kind of connection that I was able to create with Liam, because I'm also the one doing the late night feeds. There's a lot of breastfeeding happening. At that time I was working earlier hours, so I would get home 2 or 3 hours before Julie would, and I would have 2 or 3 hours just Liam and Dad time for the first year of his life, and amazing. that was so crucial. So there's all of these moments that I feel like I was enabled to be the best version of fatherhood that I could have, because of the way Liam arrived into the family.
Yeah. And listening to you talk about this, I can definitely see how it has influenced your perspective on fatherhood and why it is so important for dads to have an engaged role with their children. Your experience prior to and with Liam has definitely created the father that you are today. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but
that's an interesting point. I've never actually thought of that, because I've always advocated for dads to be super involved. A big part of that is because on the one hand, I see the value to the dad. I know how much value I've got out of being an engaged dad. And I think maybe I've often seen I was deliberately choosing to be an engaged dad, and to some extent I was, but also I kind of circumstantially fell into being an engaged and present dad, and so I want that for other dads as well. But also, I think because of our situation, I can't understand how you wouldn't be. So when I see dads being slapgat, when I see dads not getting involved, not doing their fair share, not wanting to do their fair share, using the excuse of, well, I work all day, so why should I be active parent at night? Why wouldn't you want to do these things? I've always really struggled with that. What are you talking about? Why don't you want to be the best dad you could be? I get so much from it, especially from those first few years. Why aren't you jumping into this head first? And often I've had very difficult and confusing conversations with other parents and with moms, because they have this perspective of dads. Their experience of dads are that they are not involved, that they're not engaged, they don't take it seriously, they don't care about it. When they are doing the stuff, it's because it's a duty and not because they want to. The general tone of it isn't great. And that's so out of there's a fly that's really wanting to be on camera right now. That's so out of my experience of fatherhood that I've really come to loggerheads with people like that, because I'm like, no, but dads aren't like that. Dads aren't like that. I've never been like that. And then, oftentimes, Julie will have to come to me and say, you might not be like that. And the dads that you are friends with, because you've surrounded yourself with people like you, aren't like that. But the vast majority of moms have partners who are exactly like that. And you saying that because your experience is different, that they're wrong, kind of invalidates their whole experience. But it has made it very difficult for me to even engage with dads who are not excited about fatherhood, because I've had such a exciting and again, not really completely by choice, but situationally thrown into this present and engaged fatherhood scenario. And I've gotten so much out of that I don't understand why wouldn't you do that?
And Terence, can you remember for me now, that first year that Liam was with you, you've gone through so many firsts. Is there a standout moment within the first year of Liam's life where you felt, this is what I am supposed to be doing?
Yes, actually, it's funny that you should ask that, because this actually came back to me a few weeks ago as well. It was there was one particular moment that I'm like, oh no, I am 100% this child's dad. Obviously, it was after the adoption had happened, but there was just a moment where I realized how much my brain and like soul had clicked into that role. At the time, Liam was starting to teeth, and so we were giving him strips of ostrich steak to like chew on for like a snack. Like he would be chewing on it, and we'd be playing, and he'd chew. And we were playing on the floor with something, and he was chewing on one piece, and he reached out and just put it into my hand. This piece of ostrich steak that he had been chomping on for the last 5 minutes, and just unthinkingly, I was like, "Oh, don't waste it!" And I popped it into my mouth and started chewing it, and I ate this like munched on piece of without any grossness, and I'm like, and it was one of those things where I wasn't even thinking about it, and afterwards, about 2 minutes later, I was like, oh my word, I've just taken something out of another human being's mouth and eaten it. I would not do that with Julie, and yet I'm totally comfortable with doing that with this child. Like, okay, this is the moment I was always in it, and I was always 100% ready to go for it, but now I know for certain that I am. Like, that was my own validation for myself. And then there was just moments of, like the fact that I was able to wake up when I needed to wake up and go through I think being willing to do the stuff that's hard and keep doing it even though it's hard kind of made me go, oh, this is a dad. This is the thing a dad does. And the fact that I was able to do it reinforced the fact that I am a dad, and not just any dad. I'm this kid's dad.
Okay, we've reached that time now then, Terence, because you threw me a curveball with Zoe, and I think you know this is coming.
Thought I could get to the end of
yes.
this.
Yes. You thought you could get to the end of the episode without me asking for 9 words, because
yeah, Liam turned 9.
Leah turned 9 in January of 2023, so I need 9 words from you to describe his life, your journey with him, a combination of those. And as you said to me, it doesn't have to be a sentence, unless you can come up with a sentence.
No, there's no way.
9.
There's no way. A 9-word sentence.
9 individual words then.
Okay, so definitely the first word is active. Liam doesn't, from when he was a baby, he just, his body and his brain is on, it's on constantly. Okay. Joy, he's always been a very joyful child. It sounds weird to say this about a child, but like empathy, it's very caring, very other person centered, repetition. Oh my goodness, Liam will want to do the same thing over and over and over all day long, to the point that it drives me completely bonkers. But that's how, because he'll keep doing something until he perfects it. Like, that's his,
okay,
so you give him a cricket ball and a cricket bat, and he'll try and do the same stroke for 15 hours until he gets until he feels he gets it right, and then he's going to want to show you every single day how right he got it off. What is the word for someone who always comes across as older than they are, like more mature than they are? I'll just say maturity.
Well, like people would refer to an old soul, but maturity.
Yeah, maybe not an old soul. Yeah, no, old soul. He is an old soul.
2, 3, 4. You're at 5.
5. Okay. Funny. He and the follow-up on his laughter, because for the first few years of his life, he just laughs, this big belly laugh that's just so infectious. And then he discovered humor and how to make other people laugh, and now he loves doing that too. So definitely those 2. So I'm up to 6. Wait, no, 7. Just talking about my own experience, it's been incredibly fulfilling. And ironically, fulfilling is the second. It should have been the last word, because that would fulfill the whole thing. And can I say rewarding? Because I feel like those are 2 different things. What I mean by that is, like, fulfilling for me kind of makes, I feel that I've been given, like, there's a purpose that I've been given by being his father. That's what I mean by fulfilling. And then with rewarding, there's a bunch of rewards that I get for being his father too. Like a Liam hug is the best thing in the world.
Amazing.
A Liam saying, "I love you, Dad," or "Oh, Dad, you look so," like when if I have to go to like a business dinner or something, it's like, "Dad, you look so good today." Like there's so many things like that where I feel constantly rewarded for being his dad. Yeah, so rewarded would be the last one.
Oh, hey, how was that? Thanks so much for listening to Have You Asked Your Dad. Feel free to get in touch with the show simply by dropping us an email at hyaydpod, that's hyadpod, @gmail.com. Or of course you can find us on social media, specifically on Instagram with Have You Asked Your Dad. Remember to follow us on YouTube or of course subscribe on Spotify or on Apple. My name's Sean. Until the next time, have you asked your dad?